Welcome to the Explainer. All right, let's just dive right in. Today, we're unpacking the really fascinating science of how our feelings at work actually drive what we do. We often think that job satisfaction is just this simple, straightforward switch, like you flip it on and suddenly you've got a perfect, high-performing employee. But human behavior, it's rarely that simple, and the science behind workplace attitudes has evolved in a major way.
Which brings us to a classic myth-busting question. Does a happy worker automatically equal a productive worker? For decades, organizations have basically operated on the assumption that if they just boost overall morale, throw in some free snacks, maybe casual Fridays or those wellness programs, productivity and retention will just naturally skyrocket. But is that actually true? Does general job satisfaction magically lead to high performance? Well, as we're about to see, the data tells a much more nuanced story.
Here's our roadmap for the Explainer today. 1. The happy worker myth. 2. Theory of reason goal pursuit. 3. The 5 core themes. 4. Targeting specific behaviors. And 5. The future of work research.
All right, Section 1, the happy worker myth, where we'll be debunking the link between general attitudes and specific actions. So we're looking directly at a really groundbreaking review titled The Role of Attitudes in Work Behavior. This was published in the Annual Review of Organizational Psychology and Organizational Behavior. The authors here, John D. Cammier-Muller, Alex L. Rubinstein, and Tiana S. Barnes, essentially hit the reset button on this entire debate. See, early research had a huge problem. Researchers were trying to predict specific actions using incredibly broad metrics, like just general job happiness.
Get this. The raw data shows the correlation between general work attitudes, like overall job satisfaction, and actual job performance is just 0.30. I mean, 0.3. That is a surprisingly modest link. A general positive attitude absolutely does not seamlessly point to any one particular behavior. Like, you might love your job, for sure, but maybe you express that by happily chatting with your coworkers by the coffee machine, instead of, actually completing your tasks.
Moving on to Section 2, Theory of Reasoned Goal Pursuit. This is essentially the new science of workplace behavior.
So the crucial takeaway here is that the theory of reasoned goal pursuit, or TRGP for short, brilliantly illustrates the complex, multi-step bridge between how we feel and what we actually execute. It basically argues that broad feelings don't trigger action directly. Instead, they get filtered. They filter through our specific goals, what our peers think, and whether we actually have the tools to do the job. It's a sequential chain of events, not a straight line.
Section 3, the 5 core themes. Let's map out this behavioral journey. The authors lay out 5 core themes here: attitude-behavior compatibility, attitudes toward behavior, subjective norms, perceived behavioral control, and dynamic processes. Think of these 5 themes like a sequential flowchart. They map out the exact checkpoints our brains have to pass through before we actually decide to take action at work. To really wrap our heads around these abstract concepts, let's meet Ash. She's a hypothetical employee. Ash generally likes her job, but we want to know how that broad, general satisfaction translates into a very specific behavior, taking a skill development training course to improve her work quality. Let's walk her through those 5 themes. Okay, so covering the first 2 themes, compatibility and attitudes toward behavior, we see that Ash has a specific goal: task achievement. She wants to be better at her job. Because of this specific goal, she develops a positive attitude directly toward the behavior of skill development. She evaluates this action as highly instrumental. If she believes the training class will actually help her hit her goal, her attitude toward taking that specific class becomes super positive. It's not just about being happy anymore, it's about the literal utility of the action. But, Ash isn't acting in a vacuum, which brings us to the 3rd theme, subjective norms. What if Ash's coworkers completely roll their eyes at this training? Well, the TRGP tells us that Ash evaluates whether influential colleagues or her manager actually value skill development. These subjective norms, meaning both what people say and what they do, create massive social pressure. If her valued peers approve, she moves forward. If they mock it, she might just abandon the idea entirely, no matter how positive her own attitude was. Next up, Theme 4. Ash forms a concrete intention to act. But, actually, wait, there's a huge gatekeeper here: perceived behavioral control. She's only going to take the course if she really believes she has the time, the sign-off from her boss, and the internal capability to finish it. Even if she has a great attitude and her coworkers are cheering her on, the behavior is highly unlikely if she feels like she has zero control over the resources she needs to pull it off. And that brings us right into the fifth theme, dynamic processes. Let's say Ash actually takes the course. Boom, done, right? Well, no. Her successful behavior creates a feedback loop. She evaluates the outcomes. Did she actually get better at her job? Did her boss praise her? If yes, this positive feedback continually updates her future attitudes, making her way more likely to engage in proactive behaviors later on. It's this continuous, dynamic cycle where behavior alters the environment, and then that alters future attitudes.
All right, Section 4, Targeting Specific Behaviors. Let's talk about translating TRGP into actual management practice.
How do organizations actually use this? Well, they need a total paradigm shift. The old strategy was super broad, investing millions of dollars into general attitude pulse surveys, just crossing their fingers that a 5% bump in happiness would boost productivity. The new strategy, rooted in the TRGP, is highly targeted. Organizations have to establish instrumentality. They need to show employees exactly how a specific desired behavior, say mentoring a junior staff member, directly leads to their own personal goal attainment.
I really want this to sink in. The authors explicitly state, behavioral change interventions should focus on attitudes toward a specific desired behavior rather than trying to change overall attitudes. If you want an employee to attend a safety training, you absolutely have to target their attitude toward that exact training. You have to communicate why that specific class matters to their daily routine and their social standing, rather than just, throwing a pizza party to make everyone generally happier. Specificity is literally the key to behavioral change.
Which leads us to our final section, Part 5, the future of work research. Where does organizational psychology go from here?
Researchers have some incredible questions teed up about the modern workplace. First, temporal factors. How does a deeply ingrained attitude like, I always intend to help, differ from a fleeting, I intend to help today? Second, shifts in societal norms. How do massive societal events rewrite our internal workplace norms around things like diversity or hiring? And third, non-work reference groups. How much do your family, your friends, or your cultural background serve as the primary subjective norm that totally overrides your office culture?
So take a look around your own office today, or, your remote setup, and ask yourself this final question. How might your own unwritten workplace norms be unconsciously shaping your daily behavior right now? Are you really acting out of pure job satisfaction, or are you just trying to win the approval of that one really influential colleague? The answer might completely change how you view your next career move. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.